Hello everyone, Ember Power here, and welcome back to a new video. In this one I'm going to be taking a look at the sets Ancient Roar and Future Flash that were revealed today. So basically, just starting off, we've got some grass types to look at. We do have this Monkey Trio, which basically all have this same ability that says if you have all of them in play, then you get to ignore Colossus in the attack cost of each of these Pokemon, which is honestly a pretty nice effect because it just means that you can use basic single attachments to attack with each of them, which is always nice to see. It's also worth mentioning that each of the basics all have a core for family, which is of course very nice. So at the very least, the deck will have decent setup. And of course, you still have stuff like Battle VIP Pass until that eventually rotates. So it doesn't seem too hard to pull off. And the Sim Sage, I think, is a bit weaker than the Simseer and Simpor, but still has a pretty good attack for 1 grass energy, does 100 damage, and during your opponent's next turn, prevent all damage done to Pokemon by attacks from Pokemon that would have an ability, except any Sim Sage, which is really interesting. So basically just means that if you happen to be playing the mirror or something, then your opponent's Sim Sage will be able to damage you and get a KO, which is funny. But aside from that, this can wall out a bunch of Pokemon, which is nice. Overall, I think the Sim Sage is a bit on the weak side again compared to the other two, but still worth bearing in mind since it's a nice little Charizard counter. Then we see a Maractus, which sadly is just pure filler, which is a bit of a shame. We also have a Crustle that does 100 damage and then takes 100 less. So this is basically just Cloyster, but doing a bit more damage and taking a bit more less. It's a bit of a weird thing to say, but it's reducing more damage than Cloyster was. Sorry, but yeah, Crustle's all right, but yeah, bit of a meme card, I guess. And we have a new Tristarena line, but because the stage 2 is a water type, I believe. Yeah, water type. So it won't be revealed with the other grass types, but sadly nothing interesting on the evolving Pokemon. Then we have some Nimbles. Again, Loix is actually a dark type this time around, so we have 2 grass Nimbles and no Loix. We also have this Magby, which is really nice. I love the art rare for this Magby. 30 HP is of course very bad, but free retreat is nice. The attack gradual heater is pretty weak, not gonna lie. Basically, if it's damaged next turn, even if it's KO'd, you place 6 damage counters on that Pokemon, which is it's nice, I guess. If like a evolving basic it ever has like the nerve to just KO your Magby, then you KO them, I guess. But realistically, this is just not very good. Maybe you could pivot into this, but even then, you'd still have to use the attack. It's not an ability, so yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think this Magby is very strong. But if you ever get like a Rocky Helmet style, like I think it was Rock Guard, the Ace spec that basically was this attack, but as a trainer card. So maybe if we ever get that Ace spec back, then this could be like a funny meme to try out, but sadly not very good. We have a new Camera-Up line, which some people have already confirmed is actually not going to be in our Paradox Rift set. It's going to be delayed until the January special set at the very least, which is a bit of a shame because, I'm a huge fan of Camera-Up and I like it when he gets new cards. But 2 Fire Nicholas, Caustic Cannon does 120, and you can discard a fire to do 120 more. So this is basically just strictly better than the Arcanine from 151, which is really funny in my opinion. But yeah, nice to see something for GLC. Obviously, like a very good GLC card, but in standard, this isn't really going to be doing anything. Maybe with reverse energy, but yeah, not a very good card, but still quite funny. Then we have a bunch of new Charcadets, which are fine, and this Armor GX, which is kind of like the first major card we can talk about here. 260 HP and the ability Crimson Armor. When it's at full HP, it takes 80 less from attacks. And then the main attack, Scorching Bazooka, does 40, and then 40 more for each fire energy attached to this Pokemon. So, very strong ability because if your opponent is trying to send up something small to get rid of this ability, then they at least have to be doing a decent amount of damage, right? They can't be doing less than 80. Certainly if they're doing 90 or 100, they're basically just poking you for nothing. And admittedly, 260 is on the low side, but if you're taking 80 less, at least for the first hit, then that's obviously a major advantage. So I definitely like this ability. The attack is also very reminiscent of Sandyshock. Admittedly, you're not stacking energy from the discard pile like Sandyshock was. So it's a bit more weaker in that sense, but you could still, there's like a variety of ways you could charge this up. There's obviously Magma Basin. So you use like Basin on a benched Charcadet or something, and then you use the single price Armor to move the energy to Armor GX. Just a thought. I'm sure there's like other ways. I guess Charizard's fine, that's a bit boring. There's several ways you can power this guy up, but overall I think this is a very solid card. Next up is we have a pretty weak single prize fire type, but I think this card will actually be really solid in GLC. Definitely one of the better basics to have in GLC. In fact, all the Treasures of Ruins are getting single prize basics in this set, and I think they're all great in GLC. So, yay, I guess, some good GLC support. Mega Fire of Envy does 50, and if something was KO'd last turn, does 90 more. So, yeah, just very much a GLC card. It's not doing enough damage in Standard, sadly, but still nice artwork to boot, and yeah, always nice to see more GLC cards. Then we have a new Kingra line. This was actually revealed yesterday, so very recent we got to see this Kingra. Has the attack World Tide, which we've seen these kind of attacks before. They're always really bad, but they're still very fun to play. Reveal the top 6 cards of your deck. Does 60 for each energy card you find there, yeah. Then you discard those energy, and this is actually a snipe attack, so it's not just like Sandaconda, where you can only target the active. You can actually target the bench with this, which is really cool to note. But you have to discard those energy that reveal, and then you shuffle the other cards back into your deck. So you're not actually discarding important pieces like Irida or Rare Candy or other Kingdras. You are actually just discarding energy, which is so much better because you can obviously control that at late game with Energy Recycler. So I do like this Pokemon. I think it's going to be a bit of a fun meme deck to try out. There's obviously like, the Basque Legion that accelerates energy from the discard pile back into the deck and does 20 for each one, I think. So yeah, there's like different ways you can use this card. I think it could be quite fun, but probably nothing too competitive. Speaking of nothing too competitive, sadly, is we have a Tracina EX, sadly. It's not a very great card, but a very fun card at that, at least. Icicle Soul says put damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon until its remaining HP is 30. So this attack is only as good as the Pokemon that you're targeting. I said this when this card was first revealed. Basically just means that if your opponent has a Charizard EX in play, for example, this attack will do 300 damage. If your opponent has a Charmander in play, then this attack is only doing 30 damage. So it's only ever really as good as what your opponent is playing and where they're at in the game. But because you're stage 2, you probably need more time anyway for your opponent to get into the game, so it's not like an early game presser card. Like, you do have Drop Kick, which will help with your early game at least, and healing a bit of damage actually, but yeah, Icicle Soul is only going to be good really for those kind of like weird spread things. There is some cards that would actually really like this to be paired with. For example, like the Mimikyu that does 10 more damage for every damage counter on each of your opponent's Pokemon. So that Mimikyu obviously becomes a lot more scary after you use an Icicle Soul on a really bulky Pokemon. But yeah, it's a bit of a fun card. It also has some synergy with a Vanillix, which I don't believe is part of these card reveals, but it might be part of Future Flash. But yeah, the Vanillix basically just says your opponent's Pokemon with 40 HP or less can't attack. So yeah, Vanillix is definitely like a bit of a meme partner for Tisserini, but could be quite fun. Next up though is we have a Glisspod, which sadly isn't anywhere near as good as Glisspod GX was back in the day, which is really sad, but I'm still going to try and make this pod work because, again, massive fan of this Pokemon. Swinging Skedaddle, what a great name for attack. For water and 2 colors, does 170. And you have to discard energy attached to this Pokemon. We don't really care about that because it is a water type. And if you do, switch this Pokemon with one of your benched. So you basically just promote something like a Mimikyu or a Klefki to buy yourself some more time for the next turn. Maybe even a Snorlax to prevent them from retreating. But yeah, doesn't seem terrible to be honest. 170 is decent damage. Of course, it's not 2-hit killing everything if you use a double turbo. But at the very least, you can use stuff like Palkia and Baxcalibur to charge us up if you really wanted to make it work. And I'll be trying to do that. So yeah, not the worst thing ever. Obviously not super competitive, but again, a very fun and playable card. Then we have some amazing Wiglet artworks, actually. Love to see that. We have a Wugtrio, which has got some tool drop synergy. Has the ability Adhoc Choice, which I think would have been much better if it was like Hot Chalk Ice or something. But yeah, Adhoc Choice, interesting name for an ability. When you evolve it, you get to search your deck for 3 Pokemon tools. It's a nice effect, but it's obviously not great because it's taking up a bench spot. And if you're doing that, then you have to be doing something else. And sadly, Wugtrio isn't a very good attacker. I could see this being good in like a Paradox Rift only tournament. I've seen a whole bunch of tournaments recently that were just using one set for single prize Pokemon. I think this would be a really, really good attacker actually in a set tournament like that. But yeah, sadly, I don't think this is really giving you enough value to warrant the bench space. I think we will get Scoop Up Net back actually as a spec card, but yeah, I don't think this card is amazing, sadly. However, we do have this Veluza, which is actually really playable. has the ability Cut for the Job, which says if this Pokemon is in the active spot and is KO'd, you can move 2 water energy from this Pokemon to one of your bench Pokemon, which is super interesting. It's basically like EXP share times 2, but you get to choose the Pokemon that you attach energy to, which is really, really nice. It also means that it's not just to another Veluza. You could choose like Palkia, you could choose a Kingra, you could choose like a... I can't think of any other water Pokemon. Wait, Chempao, for example, Radiant Greninja, so you could set up like a spread play. And it has the very box standard Hydro Pump. We've seen this attack a million times before in the TCG, getting very boring. All the rest of it, yada yada yada. But I do think this card is very playable, especially in like a Bax Caliber deck as a nice one-of. It could also be very playable in GLC. And I'm talking a bit more about GLC in this video and what I usually do, but I do think this card would be phenomenal in GLC actually, the more I think about it. So yeah, very good for conserving energy and has a very powerful bloat move. Thumbs up for GLC. So nice to see that. We then have a Latios, which is just a bit sad really, because there is a Snorlax for 3 colors that does 180 already, but I guess discarding energy maybe has more synergy than Snorlax, and you hit Psychic Weakness, but I don't know, it doesn't seem that great. Maybe in GLC though, maybe in GLC. We have Wbat and Swoat, which I think were more cards that were actually going to be cut from the set. So these will be saved for the special set, which I'm personally fine with because, let's be real, they're not very good. Attract Wave does 30 damage, and if they're confused, you put 6 damage counters instead of 3 if they flip tails, but they're probably just going to switch out or evolve, so Wbat sadly not very good. But we at least have an interesting EX, which was revealed for the first time today, Cofagrigus. So 260 HP, a little bit on the low side, but it does have the ability Gold Coffin that says if it gets KO'd, you can search your deck for any card, which is nice. It's basically just Lost Origins Spiritom's ability, which is interesting to see. Obviously, that ability was really strong on Spiritomb, but it was just a bit weaker because Spiritomb wasn't a good card to begin with. So having an ability like this is really nice. It just means your deck will always be a bit consistent. You know, Path to the Peak is obviously a problem, but aside from that, a very strong ability to have and very nice. It does also have the attack Hollow Hands, which is basically just Dragapult VMAX's attack, but a bit weaker, which I find really funny. 2 Psychic Energy does 110, and you put 5 damage counters on your opponent's bench Pokemon any way you like. So you can just finish off stuff, set up KOs. Maybe you set up plays with like Iron Juglus, or maybe even in Lost Box potentially. So honestly, I think this card could be really fun and really cool. Be very interested to see how like actually good it ends up being, because 110 is a pretty low modifier to start with. But I do like this card overall, and yeah, should be a lot of fun to try out. And then we finally see an ancient Pokemon. There's actually surprisingly little support for the Paradox cards aside from what's been revealed already. I really thought there was going to be like a Paradox Stadium card revealed. Nope. No Paradox Stadium, no Paradox Energy. So I'm assuming they're saving them for like the DLC sets maybe, because DLC have more Paradox Pokemon in them. Just my theory, but yeah. We've got Screamtail here, which is basically just another card for Gardevoir. There is actually a Steelix, funny enough, later on, which does complement this quite well, but yeah, Roaring Scream, definitely a Gardevoir card. Mindfoe and Mountshao are just bulk, sadly. It's a bit sad, but yeah, I don't think Moundshao's ever gotten a really good card, but sad. Then we have a Grapploct, which I think is another card that's being confirmed to being cut from the set, and that's fine because this card is also really bad. We do have a other Gargankel line, which is always nice to see. Big fan of this Minecraft Pokemon line. Gargankel has the ability Energy Rock Salt, which allows you to accelerate a basic fighting energy while also healing 30 damage from that Pokemon, which is a nice effect. But we do have to consider one thing, and that one thing is Garchomp EX. Now, Garchomp EX, for a single energy, does 160 damage and accelerates 3 energy from the discard pile to one of your Pokemon. That's crazy compared to Gargankel. Now, I would like to say, though, the Gargankel is amazing in GLC. This is like some of the best fighting acceleration I think we've ever seen in the GLC format. And it's also amazing for stuff like cubes, you know, single prize formats, you know, one set only tournament stuff. I do think this card is pretty impactful for those stuff, but, you know, for standard, I think it's a bit on the weak side, sadly, but still pretty nice. Then we have another GLC fighting type Big Basic. It does have the attack Stomp Off, so the ring I should say his name is, which is just Mill 1. Maybe there's like a Mill fighting deck forming in GLC with Stack Attacker, maybe. Don't know, just my 2 cents. Then we also have Burning Turbulence, does 120. 90 to itself, which is pretty brutal, but your opponent's active is now burned as well, so just a very high-powered single prize basic for GLC, nothing really crazy for standard. Then we have Sandyshock EX, which has a really good ability actually. If your opponent has 4 or fewer prize cards remaining, you get to attach your basic energy from discard pile to this Pokemon, which is quite nice actually. It also has the attack ground spark, which just does 200, which is pretty low. You know, it's just not great. I know I said 110 earlier was really low. This is honestly just really bad. It's a bit of a shame because the ability is so good, and you can obviously use Ancient Capsule to get this guy up to 280 HP, but sadly I don't think that's going to matter unless we see more fighting type Pokemon that can discard energy from your cards. But yeah, nothing too great. Then we have a Tinglu, which is honestly one of the best fighting types I've seen for GLC ever, period. So a great set for GLC, as you can probably tell already. Sand Gathering is just another way to accelerate energy, but also Proud Impact, doing 220. But if this Pokemon has 4 more damage counters on it, its attack does nothing, so you have to keep this guy healthy, or at the very least attack with it once and then never attack with it again, but still. Proud Impact, KOing any Stage 2 or relevant basic. Yeah, seems great to be honest. Then we have a Crobat line, which is sadly more filler. Mad Echo is okay, but you're only doing 50 damage, you know. Even if you stop your opponent from being able to play items and supporters, it's just not enough really at that point, because your opponent will still set up attackers and KO you, so yeah, bit sad, but not very good. Then we have a Light Powered, which can move all damage counters from your bench to your opponent's active. We've seen this effect before, but usually for like 2 colors energy, so to see it for 1 energy is quite nice. So if you want a more consistent walling deck, then maybe this is the one to go for. But we do actually have a Garbodor to take a look at, which is super interesting because basically this Garbodor is very reminiscent of the Tool Drop Electro that we've just seen from 151. So that's, you know, make of that what you will. I think a lot of people would rather see a Trash Lantern or Gorbotoxin reprint even, but yeah, Chuck is an okay attack, 50 damage for each tool card you discard from your hand. Obviously a very meme-friendly budget kind of style deck. Nothing too crazy, but definitely a lot of fun to try out the ladder. Sure to give this one a go. As for pros and cons versus Electro, like Electro being a lightning type already gives it a significant advantage because you can play it with like Rotom, V-Star and stuff, but I do like this Garbodor. I think it does have quite a high damage modifier, and of course you still have the Snorlax and Leftovers to work with, so yeah. Also, fun fact, the Leftovers is also in the artwork for Trubbish, so I guess that's a bit of a hint for the player or something, but yeah, just thought that was worth pointing out. Then we have a Morpeko, which is very much a GLC kind of style card again. I don't think this card is very good. It could definitely be usable in like a one set only format, but yeah, Morpeko is pretty meh. We have a Loix, which has a pretty interesting attack punishing kick that does 10 and then 40 more for each damage counter on your opponent's active. Usually with these attacks, they're like plus 20 or plus 30. So to have it doing plus 40 is a very significant modifier. Brushing my words there a bit. But basically, I think this is pretty good in GLC. It could also be pretty good in a Zork box type deck. Like maybe you're playing a spread deck with like the Electrive that does 50 to everything or something. So yeah, I think this could be a really solid finisher in a spread deck or maybe in GLC, but yeah, interesting to bear in mind because plus 40 is obviously quite significant compared to like plus 30, so yeah, worth mentioning. Then we have this Brute Bonnet, which is the Amoonguss ancient version. Has the ability Toxic Powder, says once in your turn this Pokemon has Ancient Booster Capsule. You may make both active Pokemon poison, so it is worth mentioning if you use this in the active with a capsule, then you won't poison yourself because the capsule removes that effect, but you're probably never attacking with Brute Bonnet, so that's kind of irrelevant, but still, you know, something worth bearing in mind. Very good with a Claw from Raging Surf, and maybe good partner for Roaring Moon, because you might want to poison your opponent's active and, you know, set up a KO with Roaring Moon's second attack, because just looking at this guy here, Calamity Storm does 100, and then 120 more if you discard a Stadium play, so if you do 220, Poison will take you up to 230, and then maybe like Sneezer will take you to 250, Defiance Band 280. Yeah, you could get there, I guess. It's a bit awkward, but yeah, maybe not actually. Maybe Brute Monet's not the way to go with Roaring Moon, but yeah. As for Roaring Moon itself, though, 230 HP, Ancient type, has a very, very strong attack, Frenzy Gouging, KOs any Pokemon. But if you do this, it does 200 to itself in recoil damage. I'm pretty sure at this point we're getting some kind of Protection Cube A-Spec style card, whereby you just prevent all damage done to yourself. If we do, that would be very scary, but I think we are kind of going for that in the A-Specs. Just my 2 cents, just a bit of theory time there. But yeah, aside from that, Roaring Moon is a pretty scary card overall. It's an interesting one because I can't think of anything really to pair it with aside from like Arceus Dark Patch, right? Because there's just not many ways to accelerate energy aside from using Sada and Dark Patch. So you basically just want to use Arceus in the early game to get set up and find all your pieces with Starbirth. And then you can basically just, use Sada to use Frenzy Gouging. But it's obviously not a very reliable attack because Sada only accelerates 1 energy. You can manual 1 a turn, so I could see this card being quite awkward actually to really get going and get the value off, but obviously if you can KO any stage 2 EX with any amount of HP, then that's quite a scary prospect. But obviously the second attack is also quite efficient for dealing with single price Pokemon as well. But yeah, it's an interesting card to review without having seen anything from Japan about it, and it's releasing very soon. But yeah, interesting card, be very fun to make work. We also have an Explode, which might take the cake as the worst stage 2 in the set, sadly. As the attack Sudden Shout, discard your opponent's active, but can't be used if you did not evolve from Loudra this turn, which is just really bad. So yeah, a bit sad for Explode. Then we have a Spinder, which can prevent all damage done to itself if it's confused, which is interesting, but if we had like an ability that would confuse your active Pokemon, then maybe this could be quite funny, but yeah, sadly, I don't think 100 damage plus the confusion is really enough. But yeah, we have a Snorlax doll, which is sadly a bit bad, but it is quite funny if you can get it in the right hand. So basically, you can only play this card as if it was as like an item in your hand on the very first turn of the game. So, and that's for setting up as well. So basically, you have a choice between putting this as your active Pokemon or regular basic. But if you choose literally anything else, then the Snorlax doll will be useless for the rest of the game. So it's like, do you play 4 of it and then run the risk of never using it in the game? Or, do you run 1 of it and then you're probably never going to start with it anyway? Yeah, it just seems weird. Hopefully we get like a Pokemon that can actually search your deck for a Snorlax doll and switch it with its place. I think that would be really cool if that was the case. But yeah, as it stands, I think this card is sadly too niche to be good, but it's still at least interesting. Then we have Earthen Vessel, one of the strongest cards from this set. I've seen a video lately that's burned in my mind saying that Earthen Vessel was an underrated card from the set. I'm not going to say which video that was, but yeah, interesting take to say the least, because Earthen Vessel is a phenomenal card. Discard a card from your hand, and then you search your deck for 2 basic energies. Phenomenal card. Great synergy with Gardevoir, great synergy with Garchomp. Goldengo is a massive one for this, and it's why I think Goldengo is actually going to be really good, was with this card. So, yeah, very strong, very scary. Then we also have Ancient Booster Capsule, which will increase your Ancient Pokemon HP by plus 60, and recovers from all special conditions and can't be affected by them. And really, Brute Banette is like the only thing you have to worry about, I guess, which is kind of funny because that's also an Ancient Pokemon, but yeah, worth bearing in mind. Also, plus 60 is a pretty good modifier. You would still play at least 1 or 2 of these in a Roaring Moon deck, having that much HP. Wait, how much HP does it have base? Okay, 230. I thought it was 220. So, yeah, 230 base. You can have 290. So, yeah, that's quite a lot of HP for a 2-price basic. So, yeah, pretty cool. Then we also have Defiance Vest, which says if you have more prize cards remaining your opponent, this Pokemon this card is attached to takes 40 less damage from attacks from your opponent's Pokemon. Quite scary in control, actually. It's not like overtly great in standard, not in most decks that just want to be ahead all the time. But realistically, in stuff like Geometry, of course, this is going to be great. But yeah, I think mainly in control decks, this is where this card's going to be good. But it should be interesting to see how that plays out. Then we have Technical Machine Devolution, a very, very scary card for Lost Zone, because it will de-evolve all of your opponent's Pokemon. So it's essentially like Aerodactyl, but you're doing no base damage, you just de-evolve all of them, which is interesting, because, if obviously like you Sableye, it's like 60 damage or something to 2 stage 1s, then you can kill them all with a Technical Machine, even if you whiff a Sableye or something. Or like if you hit into like a Charizard with a Cramorant, you could then use Technical Machine Devolution to KO them, rather than use something like a Zamazenta, which is probably more annoying and harder to set up. So yeah, this is a very scary card, to be honest. It's also really good just against red candy decks in general, because your opponent will run out of them eventually. So yeah, at least you can only use it once, but yeah, very scary card in my opinion. Next up, though, is we have, sorry, voice is going, Professor Zada's Vitality, Choose up to 2 of your ancient Pokemon and attach up to 1 basic energy from discard pile to each of them, then draw 3. A lot of people say this card is kind of nuts. I do think it's a very good card, but we need to see more ancient Pokemon, I feel like. This is great, but it's only as good as what we can attach to, right? So Roaring Moon is phenomenal, of course, but we need something else, because if you're just accelerating 1 energy to a Pokemon that needs 3 energy to attack, then that's not very efficient. It's not like Welder that could pay for the attack cost, or, at least Welder plus 1 manual attachment. This is Sada plus manual, which has me a little bit worried about this card actually being great, but in all honesty, this is still really, really good. It's obviously great with Earthen Vessel. You can discard the energy, draw 2, and find 2 more, I should say. But yeah, I still think this card is phenomenal. I just think we need to see more ancient Pokemon for it to be great, basically. We have Norman, which is draw 2. If your opponent's active as an EX, draw 2 more. Okay, I guess. It's just like one of those okay kind of cards. Then we have Mela, which says you can play this card only if any of your Pokemon knocked out during your opponent's last turn. You can attach your basic fire energy from discard pile to one of your Pokemon. If you do, then you can draw until you have 6 cards in your hand. So this is kind of like a draw version of Raihan, but exclusively for fire energy, which is interesting. It's definitely good in GLC. It's definitely like great fire type support in Aceless and stuff, but yeah, I don't think it's quite good enough in standard. Maybe it's okay actually, but when Charizard's ramping 3 energy, we have to find, other ways. But to be honest, if you're playing like an Armarouge deck, or like an Arceus Armarouge, for example, that doesn't care about Charizard, then this would still be a decent option. So yeah, worth bearing in mind at the very least. But yeah, that's going to be the end of part 1, and yeah, I'll see you all guys in part 2. Thank you for watching.